The Hippy Dippy Championship. The name in Twitch politics debating, where hopeful streamers, large and small, duke it out to gain the approval of the menacingly mysterious panel of judges in the hopes of winning the championship belt of glory, all the while being kept in check by the glorious-haired, ambivalent tyrant that is Dylan Burns. And in this video today, I will be reviewing the Hippy Dippy Championship debate, this bout, this duel, this gladiator brawl between Vaush and Demonmama on the left and Rob Noer and John Burk on the right. I will be going over each section of the debate, these being Amazon unions, moving leftward, and puberty blockers, how each of them did in these sections, and then go into who I think should have won overall. There will be spoilers in this video. I will be talking about who eventually won and what different arguments came up and how things went, so I would recommend checking out the whole show on Dylan Burns TV. It's an amazing channel and a great debate, and I would recommend it highly. I will also be using clips from the Hippy Dippy Championship in this debate. All credits to Dylan Burns. There's a link to his channel in the description. If you like this sort of content, you know, this is my first one of these I've done, so if you want me to make more, like, subscribe, comment telling me to make more, because if people like it, I would love to make more. At this point, you might be saying, beautiful, you're just some random guy. What do you have to your name that can let you judge these seasoned debaters, these experts that we see? A massive brag here. You know, I was a big debate and multi-United Nations boy in high school, or I guess college. I won a few competitions, and I like to think that in terms of rhetoric in particular, I have experience and an understanding of sort of what's going on and an ability to sort of dissect what we're doing here. Also very important, before we jump in, to mention my bias. I am a left-wing person myself. I'm far more likely to agree with Demonmama and Vaush than Burk and Noer, but I will be trying my best to stay objective and focus more on the rhetoric and the way arguments are made. If you're looking for someone to debunk research or facts used, that won't be in this video, but of course there will be some analysis of arguments, how strong they are, how convincing they can be, but I will mostly be focusing on sort of debate and rhetoric as a skill and how well each of them did. So let's set the stage here. We have 4 competitors, 2 lefties and 2 righties, but only one person can win, which essentially gives us a pseudo-double style situation. You most likely largely agree with one person on this panel, but you're still, in terms of competition, against them. This isn't doubles, you're not on the same team, and only one person can actually win. So if I was on this panel, alongside my general goals of making the best arguments, picking apart my opponent's arguments, etc., I would keep in mind the importance of distincting or elevating myself above the person that I am ideologically aligned with. In order to win this debate, it isn't enough to show that your left or right-wing ideas are the best. You need to show that you are better at presenting them than the person who shares your beliefs. So this is something that I kept in the forefront of my mind on my repeated viewings of this debate, and will become very important when we analyze the interactions and successes of this panel. The majority of this video isn't scripted. I have my notebook here. First topic was on Amazon and unionization. It was a breaking news story about Amazon workers in Alabama voting not to unionize. So the topic was, you know, what do you think of this? Is unionization good about this specific case? etc. So the guests didn't really have time to prepare this topic. If you're going into a debate on unionization and you haven't prepared for the topic, this is naturally going to favor left-wing people because you know, left-wing people are more likely to care about unionization. They're the ones who make the positive arguments for it and are therefore much more likely to be researched and well-read on the subject. So this kind of led to Vaush and Demonmama sort of presenting the arguments for unions and presenting facts and data, statistics, and articles, with Rob and John Burk sort of providing a more, I guess, like questioning role and probing here and there, just asking questions, sort of drawing on lines of argument. So yeah, this topic definitely serves the lefties. I think it's quite important to keep in mind when we talk about this. This debate really just started with Vaush and Demonmama just providing evidence for unions, providing strong arguments for them, and it was just sort of almost one of their stream segments, right? It was just providing the positive arguments for it without too much pushback. So John Burk did a good job at probing, I would say, in this section. He was very good at taking up a certain specific issue, taking up a little bit here, a little bit there. He questioned some of Vaush's stats at times, and was good at sort of agreeing on large things, but talking about specific examples, and I would say very strongly engage with the subject matter, in particular with, I would say, Vaush in this section. They had sort of strong conversations about small businesses and the sort of relationships of how unions would work with them, which was quite interesting, and I thought this was very fruitful, this area. As for Rob Noer, he didn't really do an insane amount in this section. You know, he admitted he didn't know an incredible amount, which is always a good thing to do if you're coming into a debate and you don't know a lot, is to admit that you don't, because, you know, your expectations will be lower. He kind of did the same thing as John, just not to as good an extent, in my opinion. His criticisms were a little bit more disconnected. They were often sort of weird tangents. There's one thing we're going to see a lot with Rob Noer, is that he goes on strange tangents where he throws a million things and he goes a mile a minute, and you totally lose track of what was happening. Demonmama had an interesting first section. I think she struggled in the first section. Right from the opening, Demonmama came in hot. She came in ready to bout. You know, she was there to scrap, which I think can be a very good thing. There's nothing wrong with an aggressive debate style in theory. I think it just depends on how you use it. And I think the problem was that Demonmama came in ready to scrap and was already shooting shots, especially at Rob Noer. And whether or not there are reasons for this, or they have personal history, or in other debates, you know, or they've had, like, you know, conflicts, that's not a good approach, I would say, in a debate to try and win, because you haven't established that your opponent is worthy of your aggression yet. There isn't this setup of these people are bad, and here's why this is why I'm being aggressive to them. You know, she had a slight ad hoc. I remember it was a joke. I thought it was pretty funny, but in the purposes of a debate, it isn't the best thing to do. Where she said something along the lines of basically like, Rob Noer's channel is propaganda. I think the problem was, right, this is the sort of thing you save for when your opponent has insulted you, or made awful arguments, or has proven themselves to be worthy of ridicule. Shooting this out before any conflict had happened and everyone was being perfectly polite was not a good look, because it sort of shows, it suggests that you're not being aggressive to ideas, or you're being aggressive for any sort of reason. You're just being aggressive towards the person, which, once again, there might be reasons for. I'm sure there is in their past, and perhaps it could even be justified, but isn't the best when you're actually trying to win a debate. Also, yeah, Demonmama had another bad moment, which I think really sort of poisoned her aggressive style right from the beginning, which she accused John Burk and Rob Noer of not knowing what they were talking about, and, you know, why are they even talking about it.
It would be a lot easier for me to not talk down to you if either of you knew a single thing about the topic that you came here to argue about. You came here to fucking challenge for the belt, and you didn't even do the basic homework. It would have taken you 10 minutes to read about everything.
I came here as a favor. Should have put the topics out earlier. It's not my fault.
I'm sorry. I came here against Dylan. Yeah, blame the host.
Okay. So let me be clear. This is breaking news, and everybody was talking about it, so I made it a topic. So I don't think people can judge somebody too much for not having all the data on this specific topic. I just do want to, I am going to throw myself in there and say
that's
that.
very,
okay, wait,
very
wait. As I said earlier, this was a breaking news story, so they didn't, you know, no one was prepared for it. It's just the lefties happened to know more. And, you know, Dylan, the moderator, had to step in and say, look, you shouldn't be blaming people for not being prepared, because this is a brand new topic. I put it on, you know, this morning. And this looked very bad on her. Once again, this was when she shot at John Burk without him doing anything wrong, and engaging in a very, very nice manner, and shooting at both of them like that didn't look good, because there was a very good reason why they weren't prepared and didn't have loads of facts on hand. And this really just made it look like Demonmama came in being aggressive to the people rather than being aggressive towards what they were saying. And I think that this really sort of poisoned the well for her aggressive style right from the beginning. However, what Demonmama did very well later on was when no one was really attacking the unionization argument that well, because Demon and Vaush had made it strongly, so there wasn't really much going on. So the moderator, Dylan Burns, sort of said, okay, I'll be devil's advocate. Here's some arguments against unions. And he gave sort of the neoliberal argument against unions, right? And Demon was the first person to respond to this, and she did a really good job.
Just a follow-up question for Demonmama, if I could. But mom and pop shops are a sustainable model comparative to what? Walmart, who's been a staple of American commerce for a very long time. When is the moment that they're going to undercut and be providing worse jobs?
We're already seeing that. We've already seen that happen. In fact, Amazon prices have gone up. I don't have the study on hand, but it's very easy to locate if you want to look into it, how much Amazon prices have actually changed over time. In addition, if we're going to expand this out from just Amazon into talking about stuff like Walmart, well, Walmart has a tendency to create food deserts completely unintentionally, because they will put their Walmarts in locations that are not to serve any need, but to serve their maximum profit, even if that means that local people have to drive. Now, that's not saying that mom and pops are going to be the only thing that ever opens, but sustainable businesses that can last in a long time by their foundation are better than companies like Amazon that can offer in the short term, maybe 30 years or so, or lower prices or whatever, as they slowly gut out town by town. And
this was a great example of using aggressive tactics really well, because she was going really hard on the ideas that Dylan said, right? I think she benefited from the fact that Dylan doesn't believe the argument he presented, or there was a separation between the ideas and who said them, so that she was just purely attacking what was being said. And it was a very good takedown. I found it impressive. It was succinct, it was evidence-based, and it was very, very strong. And I thought that was really impressive. And I think that if she'd come into the debate with that mindset and saved the personal aggression later down the line after some conflict or after some sort of motivation, it would have been a lot better. If this was her performance throughout the whole thing, I think she would have had a really strong time. So I thought for this section that it was a toss-up between John Burk and Vaush for the winner of the first section. If I had to actually pick one, I don't think it would have been ridiculous to give it to John Burk, just because of the natural benefit for lefties of being unprepared for a topic and then still coming out quite strongly. So I would probably say slight edge, maybe John Burk, but Vaush was very close second. And Rob Noer just didn't do much. He did his weird tangents. He wasn't that present in this part of it. So yeah, he was kind of just middle of the pack. Didn't do an incredible amount. Second segment was on moving leftwards and cancel culture. I think this one had a lot more beef, had a lot more arguments, had a lot more disagreement than the first topic. John Burk didn't really do that much in this segment. I think he admitted himself he wasn't much there for the debate. He was more for sort of a discussion and a learning experience, which meant that he just wasn't that present. He didn't really engage very much. So he's probably going to take a back burner in terms of my discussion about him for this section. I think Vaush did very well to immediately in his opening statement, or just after his opening statement, just scratch off formative corporation wokeness or whatever, something like that.
Okay, I take issue to several points there. First and foremost, there's one thing that I don't want to discuss here, and it's corporate performative wokeness, okay? Because that is not the left. So right now, there are more Democrats than Republicans in America, more progressive-minded people, I guess, than the opposite. And for that reason, corporations stand to make money off of virtue signaling to that demographic. They have done this for all of the history of businesses. Back in the 1950s and 40s, they were virtue signaling with their like anti-black messaging.
This was good because this is something that would have been naturally brought up by John and Rob. And by getting that out immediately, wasn't caught in a position where he had to defend something that he doesn't really like and the general public doesn't really like, and is very difficult to actually defend because a lot of it is pretty cringe. So I thought that was smart, just sort of get this out straight away. Let's not talk about this. It's useless and boring. I don't want to worry about it. Rob had a very weird opening. I think Rob kind of like took the chance to get out of his shell, and he certainly took it. He went on like a long tangent, and he was just throwing a million things at once. It's interesting because it's not even like he's trying to like distract or draw away from the debate. He throws so many random examples and random half-cited numbers and lots of anecdotes, and then you leave without much of a coherent argument. It's so difficult to discern what he's trying to say at the end of it, I think, a lot of the time. He also talked about baseball being played in China, which I think that's what he said. That was confusing to me. I wrote down baseball in China, question mark, and I still to this day, after repeated viewings, not sure what happened there. Demon had a decent opening, good in terms of her performance. However, I found some of her, she got caught in a very difficult situation. Her opening statement was focusing on the blame of cancel culture. So she talked about it's the right that does more cancel culture than the left. She brought up, good examples like the satanic panic, the religious right, canceling all these things. Fine. But this is an awkward argument. It's not one that I ever like to do, or I see it, I wince because I know what's about to happen. And it gave Rob Noer one of his only good points in the debate.
Hasbro deciding, or Mattel deciding to say that we're gonna have it be Mr. Potato Head versus Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head, and having a meltdown over wokeness gone too far. It's just, they're freaking out. They are the kings of fucking cancel culture. And this has been the case forever. The Hays Code was predominantly Christian. It was made to appeal to the traditional Christian Republican right in America. All of these things have been, for the longest time, the domain of the right wing.
Cancel culture. When the right was the dominant force in culture, I would have blamed the right for that cancel culture. Now the left is the dominant form in culture. Guess who gets the blame for it?
If you're giving Rob a slam dunk, you're struggling a little bit. Because she made this point, and then Rob simply says, yeah, and I disagree with that as well. And then went on like another 20-minute tangent, which ruined it. But if he'd stuck to just what he said, he just said, look, I don't like either of these things. The left is clearly doing cancel culture. That's undeniable. And the right does it as well. When the right does it, I don't like it. Because Demon hadn't really presented any examples where they would support cancel culture, or sort of their like brand of rightism would support any sort of cancel culture. So it just kind of looked like it really just let Rob put himself in a position of, you see, you're just biased for your side. You're only saying the problem's on one side. I think both have done the problem, which was unfortunate. It was unfortunate for Demonmama because it put Rob in a good position, and it set him up quite well. But like I said, then he went on a massive tangent and rambled for however long and kind of lost the point of it. But if he'd stuck to that point, he could have been really hammered at home and really been in a strong position for the rest of this section, because Demon put herself in an awkward spot. And as soon as she said her opening statement, I thought, oh no, if I was a right-wing person in this debate, I would just say, yeah, I don't like that either. And you'd be perfect, you'd be golden, they look foolish, done. But then later on, after I think Vaush spoke a little bit and someone else spoke, Demonmama either qualified her position or she backtracked a little bit. It doesn't really matter which one. It could have been either. I mean, like, depending on your leniency, you'd probably read it one way or the other. I'd probably say she qualified it more than she backtracked. She qualified her statement more to be talking about, like, it's the right-wing cancel culture that matters more. So there was a topic about, like, they were talking about Gina Carano, the person who got fired from Star Wars or something like that. And Demonmama did well in sort of talking about, like, Star Wars is relatively inconsequential. It doesn't really matter that much. The right-wing cancel culture is way more important. It's way more impactful. And she talked about how the RNC still has, cancelling gay marriage on their agenda. And I thought that was good. Sort of like a nod to there's more important issues than these, like, culture war rubbish, right? There was some good teamwork between Vaush and Demonmama in this section as well. I think that when one made a decent point, the other one built on it, and then they kept doing that. And I think this was quite an interesting sort of interaction. But I think Vaush was above Demonmama in this interaction, only by a little bit, because Demonmama, for one, got caught in the weeds with Rob for quite a bit of time, where they were just talking about these random examples and these little isolated cases, and she just needed to step back and just remove herself from it. She did move herself eventually, but it took Vaush making the claim that, like, I don't care about these individual things. It's less about the specific examples. There's always going to be cancel culture until we solve the underlying issues. We solve things like racism, homophobia, transphobia. Once these are solved, cancel culture won't be a huge issue, right? That was a good point. John clearly agreed with it, obviously with some qualifying note. And this allowed Demonmama to sort of step away from the mud wrestling with Rob and started to make much better points, which was good overall. She did make a mistake in getting caught up in these weeds. You shouldn't really try and play Rob Noer's game, I don't think, because you're just going to get confused and it's going to get boring and you kind of become incoherent and losing track of what's going on. John Burk was sort of a weather vane in this debate. Like, he would not, if he's nodding along and agreeing with you and talking to you and engaging in sort of a back and forth, that's a good sign. And that was some of the most fruitful conversations in this debate were between Vaush and John Burk, because they had these little pickets of each other and there was acceptance of faults on our own side, and it really just came out very well and there was a real engagement. So yeah, overall I'd say this section was strongly won by Vaush. I think he did a good job at sort of establishing the argument, cutting out the stuff that he didn't really want to worry about and defend. There was good teamwork between Vaush and Demonmama, but it helped Demon a lot more than it helped Vaush, and I think that Vaush did better as an individual. But I would say it probably went Vaush, Demonmama, probably John Burk, and then Rob Noer, because Rob Noer, once again, actually maybe Rob Noer above John Burk in this one, because John Burk didn't really do much at all, but Rob Noer had one good moment and then squandered it, so who knows. But yeah, I would say this moment was a prominent win by Vaush. Now we'll move on to the final topic. This was puberty blockers and trans issues. There was a bill, maybe in Alabama again, banning puberty blockers for under 19s, I think. Vaush had a very good opening. I think Vaush's opening was the moment where he really solidified that this was a really strong performance by him. If you're going to watch any of this debate, I would watch Vaush's opening and you'll see why he did so well and why people think he did so well. He immediately framed the issue in terms of, I don't like the idea of these old, awful bureaucrats deciding what healthcare people can get. I'd rather leave it to doctors. This is a great talking point against a conservative, because especially like Rob Noer and John Burk, they both was quite being against government in general, and it really resonated. I mean, for God's sake. And then you saw immediately after Rob in his opening statement already step back from a lot of what I would have expected him to be firm on.
Regardless of your position on transgender people, politicians probably shouldn't be making state legislation denying certain types of healthcare. That's very strange to me. Regardless of your position on this, the idea that a bunch of 85-year-old legislators are making decisions on what types of medical care can be done, that's very weird to me.
Everything y'all had already stated, yeah, I 100% agree with. I don't think any politician should be able to sit there and say medical, everything.
So it is difficult because I do have libertarian concerns of having the government intervene and say that you may not choose this healthcare or another.
He immediately said, yeah, Vaush, I agree that I don't like the government choosing what healthcare we can go, and then went on to do his argument. I think that really put the Conservative on a back foot, especially Rob Noer, because I think that it narrowed the scope of his rhetoric really strongly, and I think it was an amazing display of planning by Vaush, honestly. It was a very strong rhetorical argument, and it was very impressive, and honestly, that was one of the best individual statements I think I've seen in a Twitch politics debate for a long time. I was very impressed. Demon had a good opening as well. She did very well in this section at separating herself from Vaush, because Vaush had a very different approach. His was more about the science and we don't like the government choosing what Medicare we have, much more appealing to the conservatives, which was good, where Demonmama had a much more passionate approach. He focused more on the harm that would be caused by sort of this bill and the neglect of trans people in general, and I think this was done very well. I think her opening statement was strong. You know, this was sort of like a beginnings of the justification of her anger and aggression. You could see that, you know, this topic meant a lot to her, and of course it does, and that showed, and that came across very well in her arguments, and they were made very punchingly and very well. The one thing I thought I struggled with her, one of her beginning arguments, was that she basically said, and maybe it wasn't in the beginning, but at some point she basically said that the only way to be against before this bill or against transitions in general, I'm not sure what the thing was, but she said it comes down to bigotry. You have to be bigoted to think these things.
There really is no leg for this argument to stand on except for bigotry. And that's the thing that's so sad.
I think there's a problem with that rhetoric for several reasons. Whether or not you think it's true or if it is true in reality, it isn't a great way to go about in a debate. This was very early on in this section, so once again, the opposition hadn't really made any points which would warrant being called bigoted. Perhaps they had done in the past, I don't know, they could have done, but this is the kind of thing you need to save for later. They need to establish themselves as bigots to be plain to see before you use that sort of language. Otherwise, it just comes across as you're attacking the person, even potentially bad faith. I don't think she was, but I think that's what it comes across as. And it's not a good way to really win a debate, because you're not really engaging in ideas. You're just saying anyone who believes this comes down to bigotry. And this went even worse because Vaush went against that point. Not really directly, but he basically said, yeah, he has sympathy for the reluctance to give puberty blockers to under 18s.
On an intuitive level, I understand hesitance about this topic. Actually, when I first became supportive of trans people, because I mean, nobody's born believing anything. When I got into it, you know, the whole child puberty blocker thing felt really weird to me. I'm not dismissing that point of view because it was something I initially felt, but it does feel weird.
He said that, you know, there is an intuitive dislike for that argument, and I think that was good because that sort of like it resonated with the conservatives, and it sort of gave that olive branch that I understand why you think this, but please consider my evidence because I was the same. I had these same issues. I think that was very good, and I think that was resonated well with John Burk especially. And this looked very bad on Demonmama because even her fellow lefty really indirectly has turned three panelists against her because she said this is only down to bigotry. And he said, well, no, there is some intuition that could be behind it. It's wrong and it's false, and I don't agree with it. But there is a reason to believe this without bigotry. You know, a lot of the time it would be, and is, I'm sure, but I think that was good by Vaush. I indirectly sort of was distancing himself from Demonmama, and it was unfortunate for Demon. I think if she'd saved it a bit, it could have been better. There was a weird bit where there was beef between Demonmama and John Burk. They both came out quite badly in one interaction because John Burk started saying to Demonmama, do you have kids? Do you have kids? Do you have kids? And
I'm sorry,
Okay,
are you a
I
parent?
promise
Do
you
you have
that
children?
I know-
Do you
Okay.
have children?
Okay, give us a second.
Do you have children?
Give us a second. Okay.
Because if we're gonna go
Okay, wait,
anecdotal, do you have
wait.
children?
it was a bit random to me. I think it was something along the lines of, oh, you used an anecdote, I'll use an anecdote or something like that. I don't know. Looked weird. Didn't get it. Waste of time. You know, you've done a good job sticking to the issues. Bad. And then John Burk accused her of interrupting, and Demonmama said, I haven't interrupted, like, at all, or I haven't interrupted much in this debate. And that looked bad. Because she did. She interrupted a lot. I think that a better approach would have been to go in and say, you know what, yeah, I do acknowledge I have interrupted a lot. I have used some ad homs, particularly against Rob. However, I do think that my interruptions were justified in many of these issues. I'm not going to just allow people spouting things that are blatantly wrong or terrible or etc. You know, there is a way you could frame your interruptions to look better. But simply sort of denying that from a judge's perspective looks awful because you've broken some sort of etiquette of debating quite often. And then you deny that you did is a bad way. You can own up to your interrupted. You know, interruption can be a useful debating tool. However, later on, Rob had a weird thing where he kept talking about this study, like 90% of trans people detransition or something like that, or didn't go through with their transition. He said the study. Vaush immediately disproved it and said, you're citing this. It's not true. Rob said it a couple more times, I think, later in the debate. And Demonmama had a very good moment where she sort of restated why Rob is wrong and just repeating this point, and she did it in a very punchy manner, and it was very strong where she sort of said, you've said this already, it's been disproven several times, like, why? I wrote down in my notes, good to focus on it one more time, just don't do it again, because otherwise you're just repeating yourself, just let him make himself look foolish. And she didn't do it again. She was very good at just sort of hammering it home on this last point, full stop, boom, Rob was making a fool of himself. His stat that he used was clearly disproven by the rest of the panelists. It doesn't really matter. And at this point, sort of, Rob just kept saying it, and this I think was one of the most interesting areas of the panel, right? Because both Vaush and Demonmama got frustrated and started to get more direct and aggressive, right? They both did it, and they both did it very well. Obviously, Vaush did it in a different manner. He was being more reserved generally, but he did sort of unleash some of more his debate bro-y stuff, and he was more direct and aggressive, and I thought it was very effective. And Demonmama did the same, and it was also very effective. It was around the same time after Rob kept repeating this stat that had been disproven so many times, and it's a great example of justified aggression. You know, your opponent has shown themselves to be worthy of some ridicule or some anger or some sort of direct challenge because they just keep repeating the same stat that everyone knows is false. The problem was Vaush had come in with a very calm demeanor and was very engaging, and then he only became more direct and aggressive when it had, it was warranted, it was justified because Rob had made a fool of himself. Where Demon, even though she was getting angry at the same thing and did it very well, since she'd done it, she'd been angry so many more times, and she'd done ad homs and she'd been aggressive by interrupting from the start, it didn't have the same sort of oomph when she did it for the last time. It just didn't have the same narrative. When Vaush got annoyed, it really showed to the audience that like Rob is worthy of criticism. This person has been chill the whole time, and now they're getting a bit spicy. Like, whereas with Demon, it was like she was already at this level from the beginning, and then she just stepped up a notch. And it was deserved anger, I think. And I think I wrote down in my notes, finally, Demonmama's aggression is justified. And she did it very well. She's very good at her aggressive style. But it just didn't have as much oomph because she started from the beginning. She walked into this debate ready to throw hands. She was throwing haymakers right from the start. Oh, and Demonmama also had a strong moment against John, where sort of like they hadn't really been engaging with his point about the surgery and how that was important in the build. But she did well at sort of just like scrapping it very quickly and just saying, that doesn't matter as much. It's a tiny little thing. It's not really real, blah, 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 whatever. That was a strong point as well. I thought she did well there. Overall, I think that this was a really strong section for Vaush. I think this is generally one of the best performances I've seen in a Twitch politics panel in a long time. I was just very impressed. I honestly think this section was really good. It was it really showed that he came in with a game plan. He came in with a strategy of how to appeal to conservatives and weaken their arguments by relating to them. He adopted their sort of like talking points and did a great job at deconstructing them and then applying his own. John didn't do too much really here. Once again, just little questions. Had that weird moment with Demonmama. Neither of them came out looking very well. Rob, awful. Atrocious last section. No strong points. Just kept citing this one fact and trying to distract everyone from random stuff. Wasn't good. Was bad. Was cringe. And Demon, once again, very mixed, had some strong points, but they were tainted by the fact that she didn't save her aggression for the end. If she saved it for this section, it would have been so strong. This was a solid Vaush win in this section. Probably a tie between Demonmama and John Burk in second. Maybe Demon probably just slightly pushing it to put to second place because she did have some good moments, but once again, it could have been so much more impactful. And Rob just didn't do much at all. Overall, I said John Burk just winning the first round, Vaush winning second, and Vaush winning third. This meant Vaush would win overall. This was the same result that happened in the Hippy Dippy Championship. That's where the judges cast their votes, except they tied Vaush and John. So honestly, I agree. I think the judging was very fair in this, and I think it was good. I agree. As for each person's performance, talked the most about Demonmama, I'd say, so I'll go into hers first. I think if I had advice for Demonmama, I would say come in with more of a game plan. Have a strategy in mind, right? I think she's very good when her aggression is justified and focused on the points. And I think her speaking ability is very good. Her speeches, when she goes on a sort of a monologue, are strong. And she's a strong speaker. One of the best on the panel today. I would say overall, if you took like isolated speeches and just took them out, I think hers were probably, hers were really good. She just didn't engage with the rest of them that well. Her engagement with others weren't as strong. I think that if I was her, I would have gone in with sort of, rather than a haymaker and sort of a slog and a mud wrestling style, I would have said, if I want to be aggressive, I think you go with jabs, right? What I sort of talk about like sort of the jab debating style, where you're making your substantive points, you're making your positive arguments, you're criticizing the other side, and every now and again you just slip in a little jab, a light touch, a little like, that's silly of them, this point doesn't really make sense, aha, funny joke. Just like, position yourself as rhetorically stronger. And I think in the first two sections, if she'd gone with a more reserved but still aggressive style, I think she would have done very well. She had to demonstrate that her opposition were worthy of her aggression. And whilst they could have been, objectively, or they could have been from other debates, that's not what's important. What's important is this debate if you're trying to win purely. And in that last section, I think she really showed that when she has justification for her direct challenges of people, she does very well. When she had that justification, she did a great job. I just think she had more of a game plan. I think she could have been a real threat. As for Rob Noer, had like one or two decent moments, but I would just say to him, like, buy a notepad and write down a couple points that you want to use and stick to them. And don't throw a million examples every second. Don't throw a mile a minute, because it just makes it difficult to discern what your overall point is. You throw so many things at the wall that nothing necessarily sticks in a coherent argument. As for John Burk, I would say did well overall. Came across as just a very polite guy, I would say overall, and did good. There were comments of people saying, I'm a left-wing person, but I think John Burk seems like a nice guy, and that's good. Appealing to the other side. I would just say come in with more of a debating mindset, especially in the second section. He was pretty quiet. He was there for the discussion. I would say, look, if you want to win the debate, engage in the debate more. And as for Vaush did amazing. This was a great performance. I mean, I've seen I watched some of his debates before, and some of them are very strong, some of them are a little bit more mixed. And I think this was a very good rhetorical strategy. It was a very good approach to come to this debate because he appealed to the conservatives well. In his opening statements, he would throw them off their game so strongly to the point where they would immediately concede so much. I think this was very impressive. I hope he sticks with this sort of calm and approachable style in a lot of his debates, because it was very good. It was very good. Vaush definitely deserved to win. So yeah, this has been me reviewing the Hippy Dippy Championship. This was totally unscripted, so I feel like if it's a little bit random at times, my apologies. I feel like I talked about Demonmama a lot. I think that's because I think she had the most potential, and I think that's why I focused on her so much in my notes. I think overall this was a good Twitch panel. Dylan did a good job at moderating. I think he's one of the best moderators out there. Check out his channel. Check out all of these people on their social medias and stuff. I'm sure I have links in the description to check them out. Hope you enjoyed this debate dive. This is the first one of these I've made. I've loved making it. I love debating. I hope to be invited to the Hippy Dippy one day. That would be a dream of mine. If you disagree with anything I've said, please throw it down in the comments below. I'd love to engage in sort of the analysis of this debate. It'd be really interesting to me. Thanks for watching. Stay groovy, debaters. Oh, jeez. I think that's good. I think that was good. Bye, everyone.